ammunition. So there's a whole bunch of speculation going on, and everybody needs to understand that. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. I've been saying this for some time. We will run out of ammunition. I've been saying this. I've been saying this all along. The ammunition expenditure rates far exceed ammunition replenishment rates. I'm just a simple Marine. But if I'm expending 10 and I can only produce 5, I'm not going to catch up. And eventually I'm going to run out of ammunition, and I'm not going to be able to build enough ammunition to replace. Simple Marine math. And this is the reality that's going on now. Hegseth and company seem to be fudging. In West Point, they would call it quibbling. Quibbling. It's not quite a lie, but it's not quite the truth either. You know what the truth is, but you're quibbling. You're saying something that isn't a lie, but it's not the truth. And that could get you kicked out of West Point as an honor code violation. Hegseth is quibbling. Because one of the way they're doing these numbers is that they're saying that the war with Iran is unsustainable, that we've run out of ammunition, therefore we cannot continue the campaign. And this is correct, except for a very important caveat. What if the Department of War, in order to continue the campaign against Iran, decided to draw down war reserve stocks in the Pacific and in Europe to levels that made it impossible for the United States to fight a war with China or Russia? Now, if you did this, if you were to do this, you could sustain the campaign against Iran until you literally run out of ammunition. Right now, we have run out of ammunition from a qualitative standpoint, meaning that the ammunition allocated for Middle Eastern conflict is gone, finished. There is no more left. But if we want to rob Peter to pay Paul, we could continue this. But here comes the dangerous part. And this is what people need to reflect on, just how utterly stupid and dangerously stupid Pete Hegseth is and his bosses. As we speak, the Pentagon is redoing the nuclear posture of the United States, nuclear posture policies, to include nuclear employment plans. These are very important documents. Why? Well, we now have to envision a war with China where we don't have enough ammunition to fight China. We now have to envision a war with Russia where we don't have enough ammunition to fight Russia. You remember Christopher Donahue, the recent commander of U.S. forces in Europe? I think it was January of last year. He came out and he said, Kaliningrad's only 47 miles. Wow, we could take it out tomorrow. We've been planning this. We're ready for it. We can do this. We got this in the bag. Well, no. First of all, the planning that he was done was predicated on a AI program called Maven. Maven was used to attack Iran, and we now know that Maven doesn't work because Maven just attacks the wrong things. It's stupid. So he was wrong. But let's say Maven did work. The ammunition necessary for Maven to succeed no longer exists. It's been taken away to the Middle East, thanks to Pete Hegseth. So now, if we were going to fight the Russians, we would have to, first of all, we would run out of ammunition very quickly, which means then we need to have something to replace it. And so now new war plans are being written as we speak that talk about the liberal use of tactical nuclear weapons early on in any conflict with Russia and China. Well, there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. A tactical nuclear weapon cannot be used in isolation. So if we were to do these war plans, we're committing suicide. That's where we are today. This is the danger of what the Trump administration has done. There are ramifications. And I just want people to understand, as we speak, and I've been warning about this a long time. I know there's haters out there. Scott's been crying wolf forever. There's no nuclear weapons. There's no nuclear danger. As we speak, the United States is redoing its nuclear war plans so that early on in any potential conflict with China and Russia, we would have no choice but to liberally use, that means not just once, we're going to sprinkle them around, tactical nuclear weapons to compensate for the fact that we have no conventional weapons capable of fighting a peer-level opponent like China and Russia. That's where we are. This war in Iran is making the world a far more dangerous place, and people need to wake up. That's why I wrote a book called Highway to Hell. And that's why I picked the title. Because if we don't have arms control, we're on a highway to hell, and that means we're all going to die. People, oh, Scott, that's sort of like Armageddon, like, you're being irresponsible. Am I? Am I being irresponsible? Because if we don't have arms control, these nuclear war plans will be implemented because Donald Trump isn't wise enough to back away from bad policy options, especially with China. He's doubled down on the Pacific. Right now, Taiwan is openly bragging about secret military relationships with the United States. And China's going, what? And at some point in time, they might get in a shooting match. When they do, China will crush Taiwan. And then when that happens, the United States will kick in with a war plan because we can't just sit back and do nothing. And that war plan will now incorporate liberal use of tactical nuclear weapons early on, preemptively. This is where we're at. I mean, I don't know how much louder I need to scream. I mean, it's getting to the point where I'm just starting to laugh about it because of the inevitability of our demise. It's not a matter of, if, it's a matter of when, because we're too stupid to do anything about this. I mean, to be honest, there is a solution. It's called the vote. I just did a rant on YouTube. I encourage people to go watch it. I said, what would Donnie do? That's the name of the rant. Donnie, of course, being not Donald J. Trump, the 47th President of the United States, but Donnie. Donnie from The Apprentice. He used to have a show called The Apprentice, and Donnie would bring people together and have them do things, and when they screwed up, he'd turn to them and say, you're fired. So now we have to ask ourselves, what would Donnie do when confronted with the incompetence of Donald Trump? And we know what the answer is. You're fired. And if we don't fire him and everybody else affiliated with him and everybody else thinking it's a good idea to have a new nuclear posture plan that uses the liberal use of tactical nuclear weapons early on in the conflict, if we don't fire them, we're going to die. That's where we are.
Scott, Donald Trump decided not to attack Iran. He said that we're going to destroy everything, power grids, infrastructure, oil facilities, everything. And then Iran responded, they're going to do the same to GCC countries and Israel. And finally, he canceled the attack. And for those people who are against war, they understand that many people are happy because they don't want any sort of escalation with the war. But the reality is Donald Trump is being cornered in the West Asia, in the Strait of Hormuz. There is, what is your understanding on the way that he's trying to somehow, today we've learned from Associated Press that there is a deal between the Omani government and Iranians, which needs to be ratified by the Supreme National Security Council in Iran and the Supreme Leader of Iran. And they didn't still ratify the negotiations between Iran and Oman. But after all, the Iranian side said it doesn't mean that they're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz. It means that there is a new deal between the two governments. And the opening of the Strait of Hormuz is dependent on what's going on between Iran and the United States. What is your understanding of that?
Well, again, the same answer as before. We're dealing with a lot of speculation here. We're seeing reports. We know that oftentimes the media space is used by multiple parties to achieve information dominance for whatever reasons. But I said this a long time ago on this show. In fact, we can hit rewind. I said that I think ultimately there will be a face-saving deal made in the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman. And then Oman will cut a side deal with the United States. That appears to be what's happening here. There is no direct negotiation between Iran and the United States. There's a negotiation between Iran and Oman about opening up the Strait of Hormuz. What the status of collecting tolls is. Will it be deferred? Will it be eliminated? Don't know. But there will be a side deal between Oman and the United States that'll give the United States the pretense that it is responsible for the opening up of the Strait of Hormuz. And because they have leverage with Oman, they haven't ceded the totality of control to Iran. We know that's absurd, but this is the political face-saving mechanism that could be made available and appears to be part of this negotiation. What the Iranian government does, I don't know, because they're not in the mood for face-saving gestures to Donald Trump. One of the things they've said is the United States has to stop threatening that there can be no deal as long as these threats. What was interesting, right before we came on, I was just scrolling through, and again, it's dangerous to scroll through internet feeds, but it appears that the Treasury Department has lifted the terrorist designation on 3 IRGC entities that had previously. So it appears the United States is doing some, because Iran has always said things has to be done up front. We're not going to do something and wait for America to act. So it appears that there are things happening right now to make this deal possible. That if this is true, the Treasury Department is doing away with certain classifications of IRGC that will free them from sanctions. It's creating a new reality of a legal framework of reality. These are things that Iran had demanded be done, and it appears that some of them are at least being done. Again, will it be to the satisfaction of the Iranian government? I don't know. Can't speak for them. What I do know is this, that this is a temporary measure linked to the MOU that basically resets the clock on the requirement for 60 days for the United States and Iran to come up with a nuclear deal. And therein lies the rub, because Iran's just not going to do anything on that front. There are some face-saving things that can be done that Iran can do. We've talked about this before. I don't know if Iran's inclined to do that. If they allow Donald Trump a face-saving mechanism out of the Strait or Hormuz problem, in theory, they could consider a face-saving mechanism out of the nuclear deal, which would be basically somehow to revive the nuclear deal that had been agreed to before the United States bombed Iran in February. We know that agreement was approved by the Iranian government. Of course, we live in a different world today, and maybe politically they don't want to do that. But if they did that, that would allow Donald Trump to say, I have a better deal than the one Barack Obama had, which is a political victory, because then he can roll into the American people and say, I have secured the Strait of Hormuz, and I have a better nuclear deal than Barack Obama had. And the Iranians could just say, whatever, smoke your dope and go away, and we can move on. But is Donald Trump willing to accept that? The problem is we're dealing with a man who the Russian government has labeled as emotionally unstable. He's not a rational actor. We know that in the case of Saudi Arabia, we saw him throw away a negotiation that was 6 to 8 months long about nuclear enrichment and demand that Saudi Arabia sign on the Abrams Accords at the last second, something that wasn't part of the negotiation. Why? He just woke up in a bad mood. He may wake up in a bad mood at any time between now and 60 days. Who knows how this man works? This is a man who's not rational. He speaks of, inflicting huge harm on Iran. I mean, he's a man who, has become addicted to this concept that he wields the tools of power, that he can inflict pain, and that he's godlike in his ability to dispense pain or hold pain off, that he, Donald Trump, is a supreme entity, a deity. How do you deal with a man like this? You don't. But you have to deal with situations, and I think that's what Iran appears to be doing. Look, the Iranian government knows that they have the military capacity to prevail. They know this. They also know that if Donald Trump did kick it up a notch, that there would be serious harm done to Iran's economy, that would last for decades. It would also bring about serious harm to the global economy, because Iran would be compelled now to act on its own threats of destroying Middle East energy production. Is that the route Iran as a nation state wants to go in? I don't believe so. Is it one they need to go in? Absolutely not. Both Russia and China, I believe, are behind the scenes advocating for long-term stability, which means you have to bring it into this conflict. The conflict has to end on terms that are acceptable to Iran. But, for instance, Russia has said the conflict in Ukraine won't end until the root causes of the conflict are addressed. So Russia is sympathetic to the Iranian plight, but also Russia knows that sometimes compromises have to be made, as Vladimir Putin attempted to do in Anchorage, in 2025, August 2025. So I think there's some political pressure being put on the Iranians to not yield on issues of sovereignty, but and not yield on issues of substance. But when it comes to the political imagery that surrounds this, that cloaks this situation, maybe the best way to find an off-ramp is to allow Donald Trump to make a statement that has no meaning on the geopolitical sphere, but could have meaning on the domestic political sphere, something that assuages the insult to the American public that a defeat in the Middle East would bring. Who knows? But I think that's the direction we're heading. If we had a rational leader in the United States, I think that this would be the direction we were heading in, and that I could say with confidence that we're out of the woods. But we're dealing with Donald Trump. We're not out of anything. He can change at a moment's notice.
How do you see the way that Israel is talking? We know that recently there was a meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. It seems that the meeting didn't go well at all. But Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said this was one of the best meetings I have ever had with Donald Trump. And when your understanding of, I assume that Israel would be more than happy if the United States stays in the region. The conflict goes on and on and on, the two sides fighting each other, and they're basically sitting aside and having no problem with that. And because the battleground would be GCC countries and Iran, and the United States and Iran killing each other, basically. Iran hitting the US bases, American soldiers, and the United States hitting Iranian, militaries, and the cities and all these ports and all of. This is what I think, after all, would be beneficial for Benjamin Netanyahu and his position in Israel, because he says that the war has started. We are in a good shape right now. We are not doing anything, but we are benefiting from the chaos that has been created in the West Asia. Do you think that they're going to be able to continue this way? It seems to me that they're capable of manipulating the whole situation. What is your understanding of that?
My understanding is that Benjamin Netanyahu is in a political fight for his life right now. That his party is not doing well at the polls. In the coming election, he will probably lose the prime minister spot and open himself up for prosecution and imprisonment. That's my feeling right now. And to Benjamin Netanyahu, that's all that matters. He doesn't care about Israel. He cares about Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the Israeli version of Donald Trump, a narcissist wrapped in the pretense of a national leader. And the same thing holds true with the totality of the Israeli political scene. They're pushing each other around, jostling to see who's going to be number one. There are certain realities. Let's look at the Israeli economy. It's non-functioning. So how can you say this is good for Israel? It's a non-functioning economy. Let's look at the Israeli military. They have no air defense. And you want to speak about leverage? The commanding general of U.S. forces in Europe has told the Pentagon, if you don't get me more destroyers, because basically our ballistic missile defense shield globally is heavily dependent upon Aegis class destroyers equipped with SM-3, SM-6 interceptors. If you don't get me more dedicated to Europe, I'm going to have to withdraw destroyers that are currently being used to protect Israel, because the priority must be protection of the homeland. The Israelis are like, what? You're doing what? You can't take that ship away because that's the only thing that shoots down missiles. We're out of missiles. We're out of missile defense. Only the United States has missiles. And now you're talking about removing this. And I think this is also leverage against Israel to let them know that you're not number one. Listen to that statement he made. It's very rare you get a senior military official to make such a statement. If I don't get another destroyer, I'll have to pull one off from Israel because defending America is more important than defending Israel. I think that was a heck of a signal. And I think it's a signal that's been repeated over and over and over again to Netanyahu, which is why Israel is suddenly compliant. Now, we all know that the Israelis sit there and they just blabber their mouths because it's all about political posturing. But the reality is, what is Israel doing? And the answer is not a damn thing. Then the next question is, why not? Because they can't. If Israel got opened up to attacks, Israel cannot defend itself. And if Israel expands the war in a manner which puts American resources at risk, we will do to Israel what we already did to the Japanese and the South Koreans. strip away capacity to protect ourselves. So I think Israel's just not as strong a position as everybody thinks they are. I think Netanyahu is politically weak because of upcoming elections where his party probably won't do well. And they're militarily weak. They can sit there and talk all they want. The bottom line is they're not doing well in Lebanon. They can't advance. They're getting slaughtered. Hezbollah drones are picking them off. Politically, they're becoming weaker in Lebanon. I mean, though Tom Barak, negotiated this deal. That deal was not between Lebanon and that was between Lebanese president and Israel. Lebanon doesn't support that. Hezbollah is a power in Lebanon. Israel is occupying illegally Lebanon, and Hezbollah is strengthened by this illegal occupation, and even more strengthened after the stupid deal cut between the Lebanese president and Israel and the United States. I mean, Israel's just not in a strong position. They posture as such, but they're not in a strong position.
We know that one of the main reasons for Iran, at least from what we've heard from the Iranian position, is that it's all about the Strait of Hormuz, that they control the dominance on the Strait of Hormuz. Basically, the priority is the Iranian security. They don't want the United States to send more weapons, radars, to these GCC countries to prepare for new attacks, new round of attacks on Iran. And that's one of the main reasons that they're controlling the Strait of Hormuz. They know that the United States can bring those weapons using the aircrafts and that. But at least when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, they want to control that. The other point is the way that Iran is somehow escalating the war with Iraqi Kurdistan. We've seen how they have forced somehow the United States to withdraw those air defense systems, Patriot systems in Iraqi Kurdistan, because if they don't remove them, they're going to be hit by Iranian missiles or drones. This is the way that you can protect them, and maybe sending them to Israel. And they had ground operations, Scott. The Iranian special forces had ground operations in Iraqi Kurdistan, which could happen to Bahrain, I would say to Kuwait, if the escalations happen in the region. But overall, when you look at the situation Iran is in and is trying to avoid new round of wars, do you think are they going to be able to avoid that by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, or sooner or later the United States is going to bring more weapons, more ammunitions, logistics, and they're going to come back even under the Trump administration? Because I don't know if the next president of the United States is going to be this is Donald Trump. We know that the difference. Even Joe Biden in those days, he didn't decide to go that far into West Asia. I don't know what is your understanding of that.
It seems to me that the Iranians have made the Strait of Hormuz their ultimate trump card, and they've linked it to the totality of the obligations incurred by the Memorandum of Understanding. So they're not going to allow the United States to pick and choose what parts of the MOU the United States wants to adhere to or disregard. As far as Iran seems to be concerned, if the United States violates one thing, everything's broken, and the Strait of Hormuz goes back to being shut down. So it's the ultimate card. So I don't see the United States having any flexibility down the road. Now, as we've seen in the past, when Donald Trump, first signed the MOU, he said, I had no choice but to sign it because I ran out of oil. So how long does it take for us to, get our oil stocks back up to where this emotionally unstable man suddenly feels like, hey, I bought a little time, we can go in and play the game a little bit more. He can fool himself into, having some, interceptor production, get surged to the Middle East and say, we got enough now for a week or two of fighting. Maybe this time I can get the Iranians to break. Who knows? It's very unpredictable when it comes to Donald Trump. But I think the Iranians have made the case, and they've articulated this, that it's all or nothing, that it's the totality of the MOU or nothing, that the United States doesn't get to pick and choose what parts it's going to comply with and what parts it's going to disregard. So hopefully there are people who are advising Donald Trump. And again, it doesn't matter because the man is emotionally unstable, highly irrational, and he'll do whatever the hell he wants to do.
Yeah. In the MOU, there was no mention of Yemen or Palestine. And right now, Yemen is defining its policy, is reshaping the region based on their policy, their sort of leverage that they're experiencing right now. And today we had a new attack in one of their missile hit one of the Saudi tankers in the Red Sea. And they're trying to control the Red Sea. And I assume they're receiving intelligence. I don't know what is the communication, but they need intelligence coming out of somewhere to help them with the case of Bab al-Mandab. And they're doing this, it seems, effectively to put pressure on Saudi Arabia. Do you think that the blockade would force Saudi Arabia to change its more than a decade policy toward Yemen?
Yeah, I think so. It's a trump card. I mean, when Saudi Arabia diverts 70% of its oil production to Yanbu, and by going to Yanbu, you now have to either come out the Bab el-Mandeb or shoot up to the Suez Canal, which is, from a cost-effectiveness perspective, not cost-effective at all. Indeed, some of the larger tankers can't go through the Suez Canal. So it's a trump card that Ansarallah now has, and they're wielding it very effectively. And the beauty of it is, Iran can continue to, impact global energy markets by, just having Ansarallah shut down Bab el-Mandeb. Iran could say, it's not part of the MOU, not my business, and yet make it their business. So the Iranians are very, very clever in their negotiations. They linked Lebanon, but they didn't link Ansarallah. They didn't link Gaza, but they've linked Gaza. Remember, Gaza is linked constitutionally. The Palestinian cause is linked constitutionally. So, the Iranians have a far stronger hand than I think anybody in the West has comprehended. And one of the reasons why is that they understand the region far better than anybody in the West does. They understand the reality of Ansarallah. They also know the history. How many people know that southern Saudi Arabia is actually part of Yemen? Have people actually studied the history of that and understand that the Saudis stole it from Yemen, and they stole it from the Houthi, actually, from the tribes that today constitute Ansarallah, and that there's a great deal of concern in Saudi Arabia that Ansarallah may want these lands back, and if this war goes existential, Ansarallah will probably take these lands back. So this is a far more complicated situation than people think. The notion that the United States can bomb Ansarallah into submission has been mooted by 12 years of defiance on the part of Ansarallah since 2014, when Saudi Arabia, fronting for the United States and its European partners, backed by the United Arab Emirates, began an incessant aerial campaign, designed to crush Ansarallah. And here we are, 12 years later, and Ansarallah is alive, well, and living. They haven't achieved any of their objectives, they being the Saudis. So the notion that we can bomb Ansarallah into submission is just it's contradicted by the facts.
Yeah, but you mentioned that Iran knows the region. We know that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, Bahrain, they're all in that region, located in that region. They have to understand it. Do you see that sort of understanding? What is their perception, in your opinion, as time goes by? Is that going to change? Are they going to change their policies toward Iran, toward Yemen, toward the West Asia, or are they going to double down on the way that they're seeing? Because the attack on Iraq, to be honest, it doesn't show that Saudi Arabia is totally understand the situation they're in my opinion. And we're going to see maybe tonight or tomorrow a new attack from Iraq on Saudi Arabia, on the oil facility in Saudi Arabia. That in my opinion, that's going to happen sooner or later. But the reason I'm asking this question, as much as we talk about Iran, it doesn't that much. It's not all dependent on Iranian position. It depends on the policies in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, on all of these countries. A combination of ideas and mindset in that region.
Well, let's put it this way. Iran could suffer catastrophic harm to its energy production capacity and still survive as a nation state, inclusive of the current government, because it has institutions of governance that are linked to a constitution that's linked to the people. The people are Iran. Now we look at the Gulf Arab states. They're a bunch of fat, obese, perfume princes and sheiks that got their job because the British appointed them, anointed them to be heads of former colonial territories. They're fake as hell. There's no linkage with the people. They aren't of the people. They're not voted in by the people. They can do whatever they want, and believe me, the level of corruption that's carried out by these, fake leaders is mind-boggling. If the people ever found out the truth about what their leaders do in their name, how they abuse the wealth of the nation for their own personal, perversions, that would be the end of them. So these Gulf Arab states are being confronted by their future existential survival. They need to be able to produce energy to produce the wealth that underwrites their existence. Part of their existence is about bribing the people. They have so much oil wealth that they, either give away subsidies, they give away cars, whatever they do. It's a bribe to the people. But the vast majority of it goes to sustaining a lifestyle that is mind-boggling. And if they lose this access to these funds, first of all, the bribes go away, because remember, the first thing they're going to cut is money to others, not to themselves. But then their ability to sustain their lifestyle goes away, and their ability to underwrite the costs of the security mechanisms that keep them in power, security mechanisms tied to the United States and others through various defense arrangements. These dissipate. They're already seeing their security relationship with the United States go away. And so they have to ask the question, who's going to underwrite us, who's going to take care of us, who's going to protect us, who's going to defend us? And the answer is right now, nobody. And so they're on their own. And then, now they become really weak because all it takes is Iran to launch, or Iran Nasrallah, or the popular militias in Iraq to launch some attacks and take out energy production, and the money spigot gets turned off. And when that happens, these people will either flee for their lives or die, because there will be violent upheaval in the Middle East. We talk about the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring will finally flow where it needed to flow, to these unelected, perfume princes of the Middle East. So I think they understand the predicament they're in right now, and I think China will have a very big say in the future, because China needs economic stability, and so I think, and China doesn't play morality games. It's like, who's in charge? You're in charge. Okay, we'll deal with you. But China's shown a proclivity already to negotiate rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Maybe they could do that again if given the chance, but China can't operate diplomatically in a region that's dominated by the Americans militarily. And so it will require the dismantlement of the American military presence, which is sort of the antithesis of the security arrangements needed by these, fake sheikdoms to keep their spoiled, royal families in power. It's a very dangerous time, very unstable time. But Iran holds all the keys. Iran can terminate the existence of every single Gulf Arab ruling class within a week. All they have to do is unleash their missiles. But, be careful what you wish for sometimes. The chaos and anarchy that would follow, may not be worth it. So, this is where the Chinese, I think, are playing a role, saying, hey, we can do business with these Gulf Arab states. We've done business with them before. Let us tamper down the tensions. Let us open up the possibilities by continuing to do business with them. And I think Iran would be good with that. Iran, this isn't Iran in the 1980s. I don't think the desire to have the eastern Saudi provinces rise up or have Bahrain rise up. I don't think it's prominent today as it used to be. If this war continues, you might see some of the old hardliners come back into power and say, no, we need to do this. But right now, I think Iran would settle for stability. Because remember, Iran has made a pivot away from the West. And that means a pivot away from territories that are under the sway of the West, which includes the Gulf Arab states. All Iran needs from the Gulf Arab states is stability, peace. They don't need anything else. They don't need favors. They don't need this. Iran's already made links with its future, Russia, China, and the East. And that's the direction I think Iran will be going.
Do you think that there was a report on Reuters yesterday that it says that the United States, recently they've been using HIMARS and ATACMS and they were hitting the western part of Iran, next to the Iraqi border and that province. And it seems that Reuters in the recent report yesterday reported that the United States is running short of that missiles, ATACMS and PRSMs, and precision missiles. And they're using the range of these missiles is 250 or 300 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. And this is one part if they try to go on offensive, Scott. The other part would be the fighter jets using, long-range missiles like, Tomahawk missiles and these sort of missiles that they can use far, away from the Iranian borders, because we haven't seen any sort of, invasion of the Iranian airspace during the recent attacks, the latest attacks. Let's assume that if Donald Trump, what is the option for Donald Trump if he's still considering a new round of war with Iran? Because today he said that he's going to escalate, he's going to hit them hard if they don't agree with what Donald Trump is asking for.
I mean, words don't kill people normally. They could lead to policies to kill people. But saying you're going to destroy Iran and destroying Iran are two totally different things. As you've pointed out, the weapon shortage that exists in the United States has led to different mechanisms of employing kinetic violence against Iran. We are running very short of long-range standoff weapons delivered by aircraft. And so what we've had to do with aircraft is we use what are called JDAMs, which are these the bombs with the satellite guidance packages on them that allow for gliding. So if you drop it at a fairly high altitude, the bomb can glide in over a defined space and strike a target. You don't go very deep with this because you have to keep the airplane standing off from air defense. We use HIMARS, which is the GLMRS munition. We use ATACMS. Then we use the precision strike munition. My understanding is that we're all but out of precision strike munitions. I think there are only 90 to begin with. We fired 80 as of last month, and there's 10 left. Can't do much with 10 weapons. ATACMS, we've basically run the supply dry. We have to strip ATACMS away from South Korea and from Europe, and as soon as we do that, then we lose whatever potential we had. We know there's not much potential because the Ukrainians use ATACMS and HIMARS against the Russians, and the Russians have figured out how to jam the GPS signal and how to spoof the inertial guidance and basically disrupt these attacks so that the percentage of success is actually very low. But Iran, may or may not have the spoofing capability. I don't know, what the battle damage is being done to Iran. My guess is probably Russia shared the ability to deal with HIMARS and ATACMS, and the Iranians are implementing those measures as well. But when we're using them because we don't have enough standoff weapons, we've depleted our Tomahawk stock. So we are bombing basically the western edge and southern edge of Iran with what we have, but we can't go deep. Iran has missiles that have greater range than our missiles, which means that Iran can operate from a strategic depth that we can't reach with the available weaponry, and they can punish, all of the Gulf Arab nations, and they can strike deeper into Jordan. So, what you've described is proof positive that we simply can't have a broader war against Iran, that we've maxed out on our combat potential. We lack the capacity to meaningfully project power in a sustainable fashion into the Iranian strategic depth. Meanwhile, Iran continues to be able to threaten the totality of the strategic depth of the United States and our allies in the region.
There are two important points for Donald Trump. One of them is the Strait of Hormuz being opened again, back to what it was before the war started, in terms of being open up, all these vessels getting in and coming out. And the other point is the Iranian nuclear program. And considering the 2 points, it seems that Donald Trump right now is pushing for, or trying to force Iranians to talk about nuclear program at this stage, which during the MOU they were supposed to talk. The MOU would be the first step. The second step would be the Iranian nuclear program. And Donald Trump tried this time around. He tried to talk about the Iranian nuclear program. Iran said, no, we're not going to talk about it, and it's going to be later, after achieving, after the preconditions being achieved or being implemented. And what is, from the point of view of those people around Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself, what is that deal that would include the Strait of Hormuz together with Iranian nuclear program? And how do you see the possibility of achieving any sort of nuclear deal between Iran and the United States, while we know how difficult it is for Donald Trump and his administration to remove the primary and secondary sanctions?
Well, you've described two problem sets. One is a domestic political problem for Donald Trump regarding sanctions, and how to do it. The bottom line is, even though Congress, you can't remove sanctions, the president has a clause in every sanction bill that allows him to waive without going to Congress. Might have to send a report, but he doesn't need to seek permission. He can say, "No, I'm not doing it." There's nothing Congress can do about it. So, the president does have that escape clause. The problem is we have a midterm election coming up, and the president can't afford to have domestic political strife, especially one that can be exploited so effectively, like the Iran issue. You know what I'm talking about. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that all you need is a Lord Loomer to say 50,000 Iranian protesters were killed, and then in the minds of a significant percentage of conservative Americans, that becomes the truth. And then that makes it difficult for the president to act politically, because then there will be opposition from Congress. So the president does have an uphill battle to fight there. As I've said before, there's a deal in the making. I mean, if I were the negotiator, I don't want to toot my own horn, but if I were the negotiator, we'd have a deal. There'd be no doubt in my mind we'd have a deal. I already outlined it before with you. The deal is, a deal between Iran and Oman on the Strait of Hormuz, where the United States levers itself into the Omani portion. So whatever deal is bilateral, but it allows Trump to say, "Oh, I've got a modicum of control over the Strait of Hormuz that didn't exist before." And the other one on the nuclear deal is for Iran to basically take the deal that was negotiated by Oman on February 27th and was ready to be signed when the United States bombed on February 28th, to go back to that deal. And the way you sell is to say this is a better deal than the JCPOA that was signed by Barack Obama, and that gives Trump his political out. With those two political outs, I think Donald Trump could withdraw and just deal with domestic political issues and leave the unraveling of the U.S. posture in the Middle East up to the next president. Because there's things you can do. First of all, we're not going to be able to automatically jump in and resume what we did in the past. We've suffered too much infrastructure damage. So, there's going to have to be contracts led. There's going to have to be contracts negotiated with host governments that may not be so thrilled about having us continue this relationship. There's monies that have to be allocated. And so there's a lot of things that can be done domestically, politically, where Trump doesn't have to say, I'm retreating from the Middle East. But the fact is, we are retreating from the Middle East, and then let the next administration unravel that, shift blame to them. These are kind of political maneuverings that are possible if Donald Trump was a rational actor. He's not. So we just don't know what's going to happen.
How much is the Trump administration involved in supporting Ukraine in the ongoing war against Russia, Scott?
Not that much. I mean, we have, when the war first started, we go back to General Donahue. HIMARS was provided. In order for Ukraine to use HIMARS, we had to create a targeting cell in Germany. I think in Wiesbaden is where it was set up, and then at Mainz-Kastel was a more specific technical team. But for the HIMARS to be fired, especially in a way that allowed, because one of the key aspects wasn't just having HIMARS fired, but having HIMARS survive. We didn't want to provide HIMARS to Ukraine only to have Russia destroy them. And so there's specific tactics that have been worked out. The Marine Corps has been developing these, land a C-130, get the HIMARS off, down, targeting data, fire, get back on, and fly away before anybody knows what happens. But that requires a specific targeting, set of algorithms to be downloaded based upon where they are. So they'll pre-survey a spot. C-130 will land, they'll come out, boom, confirm, data loaded, fire. And in order to survive, Ukraine needed the same thing, which means that the United States became the targeting authority for all HIMARS strikes. Now, I'm writing an article that talks about, well, wait a minute, does that mean that we tried to assassinate the mayor of Gorlovka in September 2022? Yes. Does that mean that we deliberately struck a theater where children were practicing ballet in November of 2022? Yes, it means exactly that, because they couldn't have fired those missiles without us. Donahue created a system. So, basically the United States would find the locations where they're going to fire, the Ukrainians would drive up to them, and then we would have received their target package, and then we approved that target package by sending the data. We called it points of interest, a point of interest. We didn't call it a target. But the data has to go in. It's specific data programmed. It's not just, people are like, oh, let's put it in my location and their location. No, it's got to communicate with a missile that's then connecting with GPS, and there's inertial guidance that's making algorithmic decisions on how to move guidance fins to guide it in. It's a specific set of codes that only the United States can do, and only a special unit in Germany can do. And so every target that Ukraine had was done this way. Now, that was early on. Then the United States started to start playing political games, cutting off intelligence. So what the Ukrainians did is they, together with Western partners, they replicated the targeting. Different kinds of data would be brought in, and then they basically replicated the code so the Ukrainians could do their own insertion of targeting data for HIMARS. And so today we know that the Ukrainians have